Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Necro Thursday. It's another week of the Necromaniacs horror podcast. How are you doing, Jeff? Everything going okay with the move?
Okay, as some of you might be able to hear in the background, there was someone chopping down part of a tree in our backyard, and this tree is right in front of my little podcast studio that I have. So apologies from me. I'm sitting in a room that is uh, completely filled with books, DVDs, Blu-rays, trinkets, all kinds of stuff, stuff I haven't yet quite organized the way I want it. So we have just a junk room basically, and the junk room is basically all my shit. You know how it is.
Oh, believe me, dude. I moved last year and there's another move pending later this year.
Mm,
So,
mm.
I understand that, the trials and tribulations of moving. It's a real drag.
Especially if you're a collector of anything, it's so
Yes.
much more of a pain in the ass. Like, you know, I used to probably have about 2,000 DVDs and Blu-rays. I got it down to probably about 1,000, which is still a lot. Ton of vinyl. I'm not a big vinyl collector, but I was in a band, and every time we repress a record, I get 10 copies. So I got stacks and stacks of Isis and Palms and Crone vinyl. Hit me up on Instagram if you need any people. Uh, yeah, and it's going to be chaotic for another couple weeks trying to figure out the new space, the layout, and everything. But ultimately, it's nice. It's good to be out of the woods of Austin and kind of closer to the city itself.
Saw that. You sent me a photograph of that sick scorpion that was like
Yeah,
was riding along with you while you were moving in.
yeah. I went to my old house and took my shower curtain, like wrapped it around itself, and put it in my car. Got out of my car, took it up the stairs, and was putting it up in my new place, and saw that thing about 4 inches from my nose. And I'm like, fuck! I carried that thing in my hands. It was a scorpion on me. Like I'm very lucky I didn't get stung. Yeah, so that was a nice welcome to the neighborhood. A scorpion.
Dude,
Hopefully, though, I've been told by the exterminator that scorpions are not a thing in this part of town.
that's good to hear,
So,
man. I it would make me happy to know that the scorpions are not a thing in that part that you're moving to, definitely.
well, I didn't know if they were a thing in the house we moved to originally, and by my estimation, I think we found about 20 in the 2 years we lived in that house. And going back to the old house to grab old stuff and finding dead ones all over the place, like where behind where our TV was, or like where your bed was against the wall. You're like, fuck, that thing was like right by my head while I slept.
Damn.
Ugh. Yeah, that's a horror movie in itself.
But yeah, dude. So congratulations, man. That's awesome. It sounds like, things are cool with that
Thank
respect
you.
to that.
Yes. Yeah. This is going to be home for a while, this house, a long while. So no more moving in the near future, at least. What about you, man? How you been? What have you been up to?
Oh, busy, man. Like with my actual job, very busy, which is good. And Tina and I went to a bunch of shows this past week. And actually we're going to another show tonight. We're recording this on Sunday. We saw this band called Coffin Cats, which
Hmm.
it's her favorite band. And it's a band that I've never seen and nor was familiar with prior to us knowing each other. And we saw the show out in New York and Brooklyn
Hmm.
and down in Philly. And tonight we're going to see Twin Tribes, which is a band that I'm a huge fan of, and that's
Okay.
that's in actually in New York City proper. So we're taking the train over there. That's no driving for that one because it's right in Manhattan, and
Where is it at Irving Plaza or something?
it's at Le Poisson Rouge. Do you know that
I don't think I know.
place?
No, I don't think I do.
It's a cool spot, man. I saw seen a few shows there. I saw that band Loop play there. I saw who else did I see there? Trying to think of other bands I've seen in that room, but it's a good spot and it's like downtown. So from Jersey City, it's a quick ride on the PATH train and then jump on the subway and head down there.
Nice. And you mentioned you had gone to see a band twice. That kind of takes me back to being, in my teens and 20s when the band you liked came to town, living in Connecticut. You could see the band play there. You can see them in Boston. If you're really adventurous, you can go to New York, Rhode Island. Those days were like, like nowadays, seeing a band once is enough for me, but that's really cool. You got to go to two shows.
Yeah, it's not, I it's her favorite band. So it's I guess it's like her Rollins band, because I would do that for the Rollins band. I'd go see them play like wherever. Like I would drove
Yeah,
out to Western Mass. I saw him in Boston. I remember seeing him while I lived here in New York, traveling to Boston and then seeing him in New York. That was like I've done that. So that's I get it. When you have a favorite band, you want to see them every time they come through as many times as you can.
totally, man. I was just listening to that Requiem Metal podcast episode about Through Silver and Blood, which you were on.
All right, that's not a recent episode, but yeah, that was like I think I recorded that maybe a year or two ago, possibly.
Couple of years, yeah, I think it was the pandemic, yeah,
Yeah.
and it just took me back to like I first saw Neurosis in 1994 up in Boston at the Middle East Cafe. First time I ever went to the Middle East, first time seeing Neurosis, and also the show you mentioned, the show they played at the Middle East downstairs with I Hate God and Dead and Gone
Yeah.
in
Oh
'97,
yeah.
man. Yeah, well, that was a big one, but that was a band that if they were playing all Boston, Connecticut, New York, Rhode Island, sometimes Philly, we would just go like and just follow them around for like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, that was I would do the same thing for Neurosis too, man. Like I would see
Yeah,
them like if they're playing like in different towns that were close by, I would definitely travel to go see them. They're one of the greatest bands ever.
unfortunately, yeah. God, yeah, that band meant the world to me around that time. No question. Very, very devoted fan, and listened to them a lot while I was driving back from the old house to the new house, about a 20-minute drive there, 20 minutes back. So I listened to a lot of Neurosis, like Enemy of the Sun, Silver and Blood. Checked out the last one for the first time in
Yeah.
since it came out, and
Hmm.
giving that another chance. And it's a good record, Fires Within Fires.
Yeah, all their records are good, but for
Yeah,
me, it's like
exactly.
I know that it's like cliche to say Through Silver and Blood is like your favorite band by them, but a favorite record by them. But yes,
Yeah.
that one and Times of Grace. I think those two
Yep.
records together tell a story, and like I really and maybe it's the time of my life that was happening and the things that were going on around that time that like made those two records important to me. But that's like those are the two records for me.
Yeah. For me, it's that the trilogy of Souls, Enemy of the Sun, and Silver and Blood. Those are like the three uh absolute like the most important records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I
My favorite song by them, "The Web," is on one is part of that trilogy of records.
Yes,
So
yeah,
yeah,
they opened with that a few times when I saw them. It was a good opener.
going back to that show that I talked about on the Requiem podcast, I was like,
Hmm.
damn, that night at the Middle East on that tour with those bands was I'm never going to forget that night. It was
No,
one of the
no.
greatest nights of my life in one of the darkest periods of my life too. And it was very, very intense. It was like this like transcendental sort of experience for me, honestly, man. And and I've always been a fan of theirs, but ever since that night, I've been like, in me to me, Neurosis have this like near godlike, feeling about them
A
around me.
a
Yeah.
100%. You saw something special if you saw that era of them in like the early to later '90s. And that show too. I remember that was the first time I saw I Hate God, and
Dude.
it was hands down the best time I've ever seen them. I've seen them probably like 20. We toured with them, so I've seen them about like 20 times now.
Yeah.
But that night, man, they fucking leveled that place.
Yeah, dude. And it was that lineup too. I mean, I Hate God's still a great band, but it's not the lineup that was
Yeah,
on that tour.
yeah, Brian on guitar still, Brian and Jimmy on guitar. I think it was the original, or not the bass player they would have like a year later, but it was like one of the, like, I think he was the original guy. And Joey obviously was
Yep.
still alive. Um, Mike was with them because I saw a tour with I Hate God where Mike wasn't with him.
Yeah, I think you and I were at that same show. I think
Yeah,
the roadie was singing for the band or something.
yeah. Hey, like, yeah, Sammy from fucking Crowbar and Acid Bath was filling in on some songs, and Ben
Yep.
from Soylent Green was filling in on some songs.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it
definitely.
wasn't bad, but it was like, it's like I Hate God karaoke.
Yeah, there was something about like I Hate God in the 90s too, because that was the first time I saw Ben perform too, like when he was in
Yeah, yeah.
Soylent Green. And I was
Great.
like, dude, that guy is hands down one of the greatest like frontmen of in extreme music, in my opinion, man. He's such a great frontman singer, he engages the crowd, he's got a great voice, his stage
Yep.
presence, like everything about that dude is like
Yeah.
awesome.
Great guy too. Great guy.
Oh yeah, man. Ben rules. And like we never toured with Soylent Green, but we toured with Goat Horror a couple times. And
Okay.
great. I love those dudes, man. They're just such nice guys and like a band that's just fucking crushes every single night. I've never seen them play bad, honestly.
Nice. I've never seen them, but we did do some touring with Soylent and had a blast with those guys for sure. Also, Dead and Gone. I'd never seen them before that night.
Yep.
I was definitely aware of them, and live, man, just a different beast. Just such a cool lineup. Apparently, local band Anal Cunt opened that show too, which I completely forgot about.
I missed Daniel Cunt that night, but I caught Dead and Gone, and that was my first experience with them. And I've been a fan, huge fan of them ever since that night. And
Yeah,
even the bands, the subsequent bands that they did, I think were great, like Your Future and
yeah, good stuff.
the other bands.
Yeah, no, I know it's on the tip of my tongue. I saw them too, and I can't remember what the fuck their name was.
Yeah. Um,
Like,
just talented guys, you know.
yes, yeah, there's a lot of cool shit that came out of the East Bay punk rock scene, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of bad stuff too, but a lot of good
A
stuff.
lot of bad stuff, but a lot of good stuff.
Like
And
the whole Lookout Records thing was not my thing
well,
at all.
yeah, maybe if you think about it, I mean, that's how I heard about Neurosis because they were on Lookout. And when I was 15 years old, Lookout Records, putting out like Monsula, Green Day, Sam I Am, bands like that, which I all loved. Neurosis was on that label too. That's what Word is Law came out on originally.
Right.
So that's how I got into them, was Lookout Records, oddly enough.
Yeah, not a fan of the other stuff, but definitely a fan of that first Neurosis album.
I was a fan. I can't lie. I can't lie. Well, it's good because we're talking about the '90s right now. Because the movie we're gonna cover is sort of a throwback to the '90s.
Exactly. But before we get to that, let's hit our we'll shout out the other horsemen. So
Yes.
we belong to a collection of media producers, artists, if you will, podcasting artists called the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. And if you guys aren't aware of them yet, you should be. And kicking the week off, we have Brandon Legion, Horror Wolf 666, where he talks to up and coming and old school filmmakers, actors, and just anyone related to horror. And he does a great show every 2 weeks, twice a month, every other week. Next on the docket, we've got Into the Necrosphere, literally the only extreme music podcast that I listen to. Here and there, I'll listen to Heavy Hole, Big Will's podcast, which
Hmm.
I was a guest on that one about a couple months ago.
Nice.
Um, but Jackie really is top notch, as he says, in the extreme music, heavy metal realm of podcasters. Wednesday, midweek, you've got Everything Went Black, which is my original podcast I started doing. And I really don't know how to describe it because it's just any kind of thing that I think is interesting or cool, I'll talk about on the show and I'll have different guests sort of correspond with that. And of course, Necro Thursday is Necromaniacs, which is what you're listening to right now.
Hmm.
To round out the week, we have Spitball Media, brought to you by Mike Scandato's brother, John Draper. You know what's up on Saturday? A day off. Finally.
Day off, guys.
They're all this great content. You guys deserve a day off. So Saturday is a day off, and you get to do whatever you want. But don't fear, because Carl Hikara comes back on Sunday with Soul Knocks. Carl has been doing 2 episodes a week, Thursdays and Sundays, but Sunday was sort of the flagship day that he was publishing episodes. And
Right.
Carl and I are doing our collaborative Darkness Weaves sub-series, which is based on the work of Carl Edward Wagner. And once again, if that is an author that you're not familiar with, do me a favor and check out all this guy's stuff. Some of it's hard to find, but Valancourt Books put out a great collection of his horror fiction called In a Lonely Place. And right now, Carl and I are doing the Kane stories. Kane is a dark fantasy sword and sorcery style character who primarily exists in a series of short stories, and eventually we'll get to the novels, but that's probably next year. So that's our plan with that. And then lurking in the shadows, operating on his own schedule, Cheyenne brings us Iblis Manifestations. So that is like, who could complain about that? That's like incredible. That's a great week of content. So we got it all covered for you guys.
Yeah. Don't say you can never find anything to listen to.
Yeah. And it's all different too, which is awesome. It's different, but also the same in some ways.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. There's a Thai expression. When I started training Muay Thai, Koban would say, same, but different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
Well, hey,
yeah.
just like that show we were just talking about. You had Dead and Gone, I Hate God, Neurosis. Different, but the same.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what the Horseman's all about. And we don't have any calls this week, but if you want to reach out to us and leave us a message, we've got a very active caller, sort of community going on. So you can hit us on the Necro phone at 908-913-0782. Once again, that's 908-913-0782. And that's it, man. That's the whole nut right there.
Yeah, man. It's quite a league of assassins we got there with us.
Yeah, man. So yeah, speaking about the 90s, to close out, I got to be honest with you, man. The 90s, I thought were a great decade. And
Okay, yes.
some of the coolest stuff came out in the 90s, best bands. I was like a young, vital man in the 90s, as opposed to a used up, like old cunt like I am now.
I'm right there with you.
and great movies. So The Lost Highway was a nice closer to the 90s, and it's a very 90s film without really feeling dated. You know what I mean?
No, that's interesting you say that because I wrote down like this has more source music or current music than any other David Lynch movie, and it doesn't feel dated at all. A lot of times you go back and you see a movie that has like a lot of current songs, current of era song. It just kind of makes you cringe a little bit, but not in this one. Like it fits really well.
Yeah, definitely. And some great tracks too. I mean, the theme music, the David Bowie "I'm Deranged" song is
That's my favorite Bowie song.
dude, that record's good too. That's the Trent Reznor produced record. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's such a great song. And if everything about this film, from the title sequence all the way to the end, has a very excellent atmosphere and like this really cool stylized like vibe to it. And even the music fits. Though I'm not really, I don't really like Marilyn Manson, but like
No,
the
no.
Marilyn Manson track is actually pretty cool. That's on this record, on the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got Rammstein blaring in one scene, which that was the very first time I think I've ever heard of Rammstein was through that film. And even though it's like new metal, the fact that it's sung in German makes it so much more evil.
Rammstein is a band that I actually have grown to like.
Yeah.
I don't really consider them new metal though. They're like a different type of flavor of whatever. They have their own unique thing, really, in my opinion.
Right, but in '97 when this film came out, I was 21, almost 21 years old when I saw this, and a little bit closed-minded, and like not into trying out different things. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Yeah,
this is fucking cheesy. I'm not into it, but I really secretly kind of liked it. You know?
I was on the same page with that. And my drummer in Tombs is a huge Rammstein fan. And I remember just like a few years ago traveling, and he would drive, and he would play that stuff. I'm like, oh Jesus, man, those fucking kids like it to, but no, but after like a while, I thought their music's actually pretty sick. And then I saw like there was like a bunch of stuff on Prime, like live sets, like
Mm.
live concert footage. I'm like, this is actually like very cool, like production kind of thing,
Yeah, they have a whole big thing going. Apparently, they're absolutely huge in Germany and Europe. I don't hear in the States. I don't know, not so much, but over there, quite big.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, another band that I don't really like, but their track's cool is Smashing Pumpkins.
That's right, and I think that was like the electro period of Smashing Pumpkins, like because I remember that song coming up, and I was like, yeah, I don't know this one.
Yeah, I despise Billy Corgan. Like, I
Yeah, he's
fucking
a jerk off.
yeah. I mean, I don't know the man personally, but his creative output and any kind of footage I've ever seen him speaking in
Yeah.
makes me cringe for the most part.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, so much so that like last summer, Evan Hopper and I went to go see Interpol opening for the Smashing Pumpkins down at the PNC Arts Center in Jersey, as an outdoor like amphitheater kind of thing, and did not stick around for the Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, go late, leave early.
Yeah,
Another band like you get on the soundtrack that I never really cared for, but have come to sort of respect is Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails. Never was a fan.
at the time that this movie came out, I was not a Nine Inch Nails fan, but once again, over the course of the last 20 years or so, I have become a very big admirer of Trent Reznor and an appreciator of Nine Inch Nails for sure.
I like his soundtrack work. I like the song he did with David Bowie. I'm Afraid of Americans. They got a song here and there, and but they always did their thing. Like David Fincher did a couple videos for him, and there's always like an interesting aesthetic with that band, but musically it just never really quite clicked with me. But I remember watching Twin Peaks: The Return, and there was a scene with Nine Inch Nails performing a song, and I did like that song, and I thought I was like, yeah, I've kind of given up my negative feelings towards Nine Inch Nails at that point.
Yeah, I think I've never seen him. Well, actually, that's a lie. I did see Nine Inch Nails once, but it was like at
Oh, really?
Lollapalooza. Yeah, it was at
Oh, wow, you went to that
Lollapalooza.
one?
Yeah, it was like during the day, and
Mm.
it didn't really translate that well.
Yeah, that was with the Body Count and Rollins band, right?
Rollins band. Yep, I missed the Rollins band,
Mm,
which is like
man.
one of my whole reasons for going was to see them in Jane's Addiction, and like that. I saw Jane's Addiction, and they were great,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I missed
yeah,
the
they were
Rollins.
great.
Yeah,
Oh
I've
man,
I've
yeah.
I've seen the Jane's Addiction and Rollins prior to that, like on tour. They toured
I
together.
saw. Yeah, it was just a few months before Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
saw that tour. Yeah,
yeah, I've seen Tool open for Rollins band too.
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I did not see that tour. No.
Yeah. No, it's and that was like the heyday, the height of Henry Rollins's powers, really. You know what I mean? Like he was like a young dude, like the band really
Like
like on point.
the End of Silence era.
Dude, can't fuck with that record, man.
Yeah,
You know
no,
what I
that's a
mean?
good one. Yeah,
And
totally.
live in the early 90s, the Rollins band were like one of the greatest live bands ever, in my opinion.
And Henry Rollins in this movie.
That's right. Playing his favorite type of person. Like cop slash prison guard slash like, authoritarian right wing guy.
Yeah, it's great about this movie is it's kind of all small parts, but everyone brings so much to their small part.
Yeah. So let's just run through some of the particulars here. Um, so released January 15th, 1997, a great year.
Hmm.
134 minutes long. So it's a bit on the long side. Directed by David Lynch and written by Lynch along with Gary Gifford. And yeah, definitely a little bit on the longer side, but
Sure.
the movie kind of moves along, really, you know?
It does. It goes through so many different like you follow different leads throughout the movie. It doesn't feel long.
I'm just going to run down some of the people that were in this film because there's a kind of a like you indicated earlier, there's a lot of small parts, but there's a lot of people in this movie. So I'm just going to, run through like some of the
Sure.
more notable people. Of course, the starring actors in this are Bill Pullman as Fred Madison, Patricia Arquette playing a dual role as Renee Madison and Alice Wakefield. Balthazar Getty of the Getty family, the Getty oil family, plays
Yeah, yeah.
Pete Dayton, and real live murderer Robert Blake as the mystery man.
Allegedly.
Alleged murderer
Yeah.
Robert Blake.
Alleged
Uh,
murder who definitely did it.
yeah, uh, the great Robert Loggia, who you all recognize from
Mm,
The Sopranos and a myriad of like other great, character acting roles as
the
Mr.
best.
Eddie, and Dick Laurent playing another sort of
Sort of
kind
dual
of
role. Yeah.
kind of a dual role. Yeah, yeah. Richard Pryor is Arnie, the guy who owns the body shop, the auto
Yeah.
shop that Pete works in. Um, we mentioned that Henry Rollins is in here playing a cop slash, or not really a cop, but a prison guard.
Right.
Jack Nance, the great Jack Nance, Razorhead fame, and a mainstay in most of Lynch's movies. Plays Phil, a guy who works at the auto place.
Hmm.
Giovanni Ribisi, who I didn't know was in this movie, and I still can't place him in it, was also in this film playing Steve
He
V.
Yeah, he was one of Pete's friends that come to get him. Like when they're
Oh,
like, "Oh, you're doing okay," and they go bowling or something. Yeah, that was Giovanni Ribisi.
I didn't place him as that.
Yeah,
The
blink and
great,
you'll miss it.
the great Gary Busey as Pete's dad, Bill
Yeah,
Dayton rather.
yeah,
And then also Marilyn Manson and Twiggy Ramirez of Marilyn Manson fame both play porn actors in this movie.
yes. Another blink and you'll miss it sort of cameo.
Yeah, you got to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, it's a Lynch movie. You should be paying attention.
Yeah. So now,
Yeah.
before we get into all this stuff, let me ask you a question. I'm gonna pose this question to you, and this
Okay.
is a debatable, the thing that comes up a lot out there in the world talking about David Lynch. Does David Lynch make horror movies?
I'm glad we're starting with this because, Mike, I wanted to ask you the same question. I don't think David Lynch's, I don't think his intent is to make something that is within the horror genre. I just think his overall vision is incredibly nightmarish and
Yeah.
scary. And therefore, to me, these count as horror movies. This, Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet, Eraserhead, and Inland Empire, to me, you can make a pretty strong argument that they are indeed horror movies. What do you
I'm
think?
pretty much aligned with you on that. I think that David Lynch is not a horror film director,
Right,
like say John Carpenter or something like that.
right,
But many of his films are horror films.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would put Twin Peaks in that too. Like there's always some sort of mystery, murder kind of thing happening. All brought to you in a very nightmarish sort of way. Sometimes when you telling someone about a dream that you had, it almost sounds like you're describing the plot of a Lynch movie sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm going to go one step further and to say that David Lynch makes weird tales. Like I don't think
Sure.
that these are not like conventional in the sense of werewolves, vampires, zombies, or even serial killers or slasher type stuff. It's
Right.
but it's something else. There's a sort of nod to, I would say, the cosmic in some ways, because as this we'll get into this movie, there's the concept of like multiverses and the hint of the eternity in a lot of his films. And there's like strange, very weird fiction-esque aspects to a lot of his films. Like,
Yes, yes.
if he was an author, right? If he wrote short stories, you could see his short stories being adjacent to like Thomas Ligotti and Mark Samuels and all these guys. You know what I mean?
Probably, yeah. It should be noted that he has a fine art background, David Lynch. Um, he's a painter before he's a filmmaker, and it does show in his films that he is making artistic statements and more so than I think that interests him more than things like plot
Yeah.
and character. And which is what I wanted to pose a question to you, especially around this time when this film came out. The accusation was David Lynch movies are weird for the sake of weird, and that none of it makes any sense. And I can see how some people could say that, but if you do watch his movies and think about them, there is very much a plot and themes and things to follow. It's not just a bunch of random occurrences. I mean, do you agree or disagree?
First of all, this is my like I'm gonna get on a little bit of a box right now.
All right,
Um,
I want to hear it. All right,
yeah.
I'm here for it.
So, if you're a basic, simple person, this is not for you. All right.
Right, right.
I am not a basic, simple person. Okay. I've been accused of many things during the course of my life, of being an elitist, of being pretentious, of being a snob when it comes to creative things.
Hmm.
And I wholeheartedly embrace that.
You
Okay.
should. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been accused of all that. And I'm like, yeah, at least I'm not, I don't eat yellow mustard. You know what I mean? Like I have like very refined tastes when it comes to things like this. And go ahead, say what you want. But yeah, I'm not one of those people. And this movie is for me. And it's not, if you want to go watch like explosions and, stuff like that, and, whatever, car chases, like have
Hey,
at it.
that's yeah.
I like movies like that too. But if you
Me
want
too.
to think and experience something that you have to think about, then yeah, go ahead. So that's my take on that. So yeah, if you're like, oh, this is weird for the sake of weird, then you're a simpleton, and you could go, go take a walk off a short pier if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the intent and what he wants is right up there on the screen. I don't think any of it is as random. I think there's reason for everything that you see, and this is the kind of film that really speaks to me. Like we covered the movie Enemy last year,
Yeah,
and that kind of fit. Like, I mean, obviously it wasn't a Lynch film, but it was very like Lynchian in the way it presents its plot or ideas. Were you a Lynch fan by the time this film came out?
oh yeah, definitely,
Okay,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I've talked about this prior. That when I was in college, I went on a date with a girl to see Blue Velvet, and she walked out like like halfway through, like after the scene with where with Isabella Rossellini and Dennis Hopper.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
I
had to, I
know.
had to
Yeah.
I had to go back and watch it again. Like I said, we went to the movie theater, and and that was the template for all the relationships in my life, actually. You know what I mean? Pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this in the theater in 1997. I went with two of what would be my future bandmates. I went with Aaron Turner and I went with Chris Marishak. Chris was the original keyboard player for ISIS, and obviously Turner was a singer guitar player for ISIS. We went. I think we saw this at the cool. I seem to remember seeing this somewhere in Kenmore Square. Do you remember being a theater being in Kenmore Square?
I don't actually. I remember
I
uh
don't either.
more like there was a theater that was down in Copley. So maybe you saw, that's not too far from Kenmore.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly
Yeah.
where we saw it, but I remember there was a lot of Emerson students there, and the singer for Slapshot sat in front of us.
Oh wow. Damn.
Yeah,
Choke.
yeah, Choke. Yes, yeah, exactly. And there was a big uproar when the film ended. It seemed like much of the audience, film students, fucking hated the movie. And for me, it's solidified that I'm a David. See, I hadn't seen Twin Peaks yet. I hadn't watched
Yeah.
that, but I was obviously well aware of David Lynch. It was right after we saw that movie, I went to Chris Marishak's dorm room, and over the course of a month, he had Twin Peaks on VHS, and we'd watch like one or two episodes a night. So I'll always have very fond memories of that time in my life where I was seeing Twin Peaks for the first time, and I was so enthralled by what I just saw with Lost Highway. I wanted more. I had already seen all other David Lynch stuff, so it was only natural. Like, all right, finally, I'm going to watch Twin Peaks.
At the time, I'd seen Blue Velvet, I'd
Yeah.
seen Wild at Heart, and I'd seen Eraserhead, and I was totally down. I didn't see Blue Velvet until like maybe 98 or 99.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I didn't watch it in real time because during that period of my life, I was living this kind of like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn existence where there was no TV, no connection to regular media that in during that phase of my life. So
Yeah. Been there. Yeah.
there was no cable, there was nothing like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I missed that and X-Files in real time. So I caught up on that stuff later in the 90s when I
Yeah.
became
I was late to the X Files party as well.
when I became more of like a citizen, you know what I mean?
um. Fuck. I forgot what I was going to say. I
Also,
guess.
this is around the time that you and I met.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah. But it was right around. I think maybe just a few months later. I think it is that we met.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a good film to talk about for sure between me and you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We were both living in Boston at the time. We both apparently didn't have TVs. We weren't watching the X Files. But it was exciting, man. Like I remember that it was the first time I went to the movies in a long time and left really excited about something. I had just seen something very visionary, and and I remember like looking through the newspapers and books and things like that for reviews for it, and they were all trashing this movie. And I don't know if you remember that, but this was not well received when it came out.
No, it wasn't, and I didn't see it in the theater. I actually saw it on VHS, like when it,
Oh, okay.
like a few months after the theatrical release, because I was living in that house down the street from where you lived, and on what was that?
Calumet.
Calumet Street. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like someone had it wasn't my membership, but someone had a membership to like, whatever, Blockbuster. And one day this along with I remember distinctly two movies showing up at the house, this movie
Hmm.
and an Event Horizon. And like Event Horizon never left the house, but this
Yeah.
one got returned. So I'm still not clear on whose membership that was that we used. But yeah, then that's when I
Yeah.
watched it. I was like, oh, it's a new David Lynch movie. I got to see it. So
I'm
yeah,
curious as to who in the house would fucking rent that other than you.
probably Lefty.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Lefty lived there. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that he was cool, liked great stuff, was into a lot of cool music, a lot of cool like movies and books and everything. But he was going through a very difficult period in his life, so which led to very violent behavior. I'm glad that he's able to super see, get past or transcend all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that I remember that time of my life too, meeting all you guys. You being around the corner from me and everything. We also, I think I said this on the podcast before. We had a copy of Train Spotting from Blockbuster that was in our house for a year, and no one there had a Blockbuster membership. So we were like, I don't know how the fuck who rented this, why it's here, but someone owed Blockbuster a lot of money for Train Spotting.
Yeah, yeah. So since this film, in some ways, this movie is one of Lynch's more linear narratives, but in
Yeah, I
some ways
agree.
it's not. It's not though. It's because there is not like there's a loop that goes on in this movie.
Yes, and I'll say this, like Lynch tells kind of like a very simple idea, and he tells it in a very complex way. Like if you were to break this movie down into one or two sentences, it would sound like something would be easy to digest and easy to understand. But the movie is anything but. but at its heart, I think it's kind of a simple idea.
I mean, if I were to reduce everything to one sentence, I would say basically the movie is about a man who murders his wife, significant other, and because she is you know, there's a lack of fidelity there. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Jealousy and all of these like, horrible human characteristics enter into their relationship. And he's trying to escape. And maybe all of these things were put into motion by now I think, okay, all these things are put into motion by there's an embodiment of all human emotions in this, bad, dark human emotions. And I'll talk about that later. And then
Mhm.
after he murders his significant other, he tries to escape from justice, but it finds him ultimately, even though he,
Yep.
he transfers himself into different parallel multiverse realities. He still cannot escape the crime, the sin that he committed.
Yes.
So
And I think we're on the exact same page with this movie. I had it written down just as like one the film is really about not accepting the reality of what you've done.
yeah, exactly. And and also it's like I've never murdered anyone, obviously, but
That's
when
good.
you when you fuck up really bad, you're like, man, I wish I was someone else right now, man. I
Right.
don't want to, I don't want to be who I am. Like you want to escape your reality. You don't want to be, I wish I wasn't here. I want to go to sleep because I could dream somewhere else that I'm someone else. And I think that might have been like the heart of this movie. It's like someone who did something so terrible that they want to escape and they disappear into this dream world. And then their consciousness actually gets put into another version of themselves that exists in another part of the multiverse. And there's like that whole quantum physics concept about like the if there's infinite versions of yourself in the universe, in a quantum level, where like there's a version where like I'm a woman or something like that, or there's a version of myself where you got like a mustache or something, or there's a version
Right.
without a mustache, and there's a version where like every single iteration of any possibility has been envisioned in an infinite world, and that's kind of I think plays into some of this stuff too. So it's not like I said, it's not necessarily these are like weird cosmic concepts,
Hmm.
and that's a lot of Lynch's films have that. It's like
Oh
very
yeah.
much in line with that kind of like Thomas Ligotti like sort of take on things.
Yeah, Lynch has a big thing. Duality plays a huge part in all of his films, as does the presence of electricity meaning
Yep.
something,
Yeah.
or like lodges or rooms where people come in and then they come out and they're different. These are all like very big Lynchian things, and they're all in this.
And it makes sense that electricity is part of it too, because all of that's kind of the glue that the engine that moves life forward is electricity. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like
Yeah.
all of our brain, everything, there's like electrical impulses, like the way our body is run, and it's all electricity and like thermodynamics basically.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And like you said, this movie is a loop. It's non-linear, but it's also a loop. So it's an extra interesting for that, because I think there's more than one murder that our protagonist is really wrestling with in this film. So the movie opens up with the main character Fred looking disturbed and distressed, and he gets a call on his monitor. This is the 90s, folks. So, people remember those things like,
Oh
someone
yeah.
would buzz you and you could talk. And he
Of
gets a
course.
buzz, and the voice at the other end, distorted, says Dick Laurent is dead. And so begins the mystery of Lost Highway. And, you see Fred and his wife, Renee. And man, I love the way these scenes are shot. It is so cold and the dialogue is very like there's a tension between the two, and the dialogue, it's not like how people talk to each other. These long pauses between words, and you can just tell something is really off without saying something's off. It's a look. Fred looks very disturbed. Renee looks disinterested. But you can almost cut the tension in the first few scenes with a knife.
Yeah, exactly. And their apartment that they live in, or their condo, where everything is dark and
Yeah,
shadowy, and there's just like it doesn't seem like a warm place at all.
that is actually a house, and that is actually David Lynch's house.
Really?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Apparently, I know someone who lived in that house with the Lynch family.
Really?
When I was, catering in LA, you meet a lot of actors and artists, comedians, and you spend long hours with these people. And
Like
I was working,
John Bernthal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was working with, I was clearing a table with this girl, and we were talking about where we lived. She's like, "Oh, I live kind of in the hills," and my boyfriend's father is like a big time Hollywood director. I'm not going to tell you who he is because everyone freaks out when I tell them. I'm like, yeah, okay. And she goes, all right, fine. It's David Lynch.
You twisted my arm. It's David Lynch. That's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I was like, holy shit, you live with David Lynch? She's like, yeah. And yeah, so apparently that's the house. At
Damn.
least the exteriors and some of the interiors. Like that table that they use to put their keys on and things like that. David Lynch built that.
Wow.
Yeah. Lynch is also quite the craftsman, apparently.
That's pretty cool,
But
actually. Yeah.
yeah, it would make sense he would live in a house like that. It just it feels, Lynchian. Like it looks like it's something out of a David Lynch movie because, it is.
Yeah, that's some insights that's not really out there. You know what I mean? Wow.
Well, no, like if Lynch has talked about how he was like and ended up using some of his own home for some shots. He has mentioned that before.
Hmm.
I think I could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you have some insight into what we're talking about, please feel free to give us a call or send us a message. But yeah, it's interesting too. Like Fred's a musician, a sax player, and like on this avant-garde jazz sort of group, and they have this really nice house in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah, it's not a high income sort of vocation, you know what I mean? As you and I both know, really,
Yeah, yeah,
playing
exactly.
music.
And it sort of hints at Renee having like shady friends and things like that. And uh, again, without saying this, you can tell Fred suspects that Renee is cheating on him because they get a videotape in the mail. The way she reacts to the videotape is very tense and telling. Like she's terrified of what could be on that because she knows. She knows she's up
Yeah.
to no good. He knows it, but just doesn't really know it. He just, thinks he knows it.
Yeah, it's like, is it a video of her like screwing some guy or something? You know what I mean? Like that's someone dropping a line on her about what she's up to outside of their relationship or that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's almost like she seems relieved when it's a video of the front of their house.
Yeah, because she's like, oh, I think this is like a real estate thing, or
Yeah.
whatever, which it clearly isn't. I mean, that would freak me out really quite a bit, actually. If I just got a VHS tape on my front doorstep of just, a, you know, a shot of the outside of the house,
It's extremely creepy, and a few scenes happen after that I feel are very important. Like for instance, they have sex, and Fred can't perform. I
which is
think
like, I mean,
it's
not to be crass, but I don't get it. It's almost
yeah.
like
Yeah, it doesn't happen to me. No,
well, no, I
but
mean, considering
you know,
who the other partner is, I don't get it. But go ahead.
yeah, no, I got you. And then he tells her about a dream that he had where he was in bed with her. It looked like her, but it wasn't her. Also kind of reminded me that ISIS sampled that in
Yeah.
our first EP. I'd completely forgotten about that. We used that as a sample. And at one point, he looks over and sees a man's face superimposed onto hers.
Yes. Now
And
you
yeah, that's sort of a hint of things to come.
now let me let's want to riff a little bit on the Mystery Man played by Robert Blake, alleged murderer Robert Blake. All right, now the Mystery Man, like I don't believe I think the Mystery Man is sort of a manifestation of all the dark forces in humanity. You know what I mean? Like I think that because he's a character that shows up consistently through the film. It's
Yes,
almost like I would say Fred slash Pete's dark side is the Mystery Man. That's
that's what
put
I have written
Yeah,
down.
that's pushing the narrative forward. That's pushing all the action in his life forward to eventually commit these very dark things, commit these murder and that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think he is a personification of the darkness within. He could also be symbolic of the truth because at one point, Fred uh, has a line saying, I don't like video cameras. I like to remember things so I remember them, not as they happened.
Yeah.
And I think that right there is very, very important to understanding this movie because the mystery man Robert Blake has a video camera with him
At
at
all
all times.
times. Yeah.
So he is sort of like the truth, the thing about Fred he doesn't want to admit about himself.
Now, part of this riff too is like like everyone reality is like such a subjective thing. Like
Mm,
people remember things the same thing very differently. And even like in relationships with people, it's like, well, this is the way I feel. Then the other person perceives you as being completely different. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely.
And Robert Blake's character of the Mystery Man is sort of like the empirical absolute value recorded in real time of the truth. And the character Fred, like most people, and he even stated it in what you just said, likes to remember things his own way, meaning that
Right.
he lives a life which he has deluded himself. Because to varying degrees, no one really knows how they exist in the world. They only just have like their subjective point of view. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
interesting, very interesting. Because for the first time you see this film, you're like, who the hell is this guy? Who's this guy? Like,
Yeah.
but but I don't
Eh,
believe that he actually is present in any of these scenes that he's in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that because even at one point, Fred goes to Andy, this porn producer, goes, "Who is that guy?" And he looks up the stairs and says, "Oh, I think he's friends with Dick Laurent, but he could be looking at anyone. He's not the only person on the stairs."
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah,
even when he appears at that party, it's like all the sound goes down and it's just him and Fred.
yeah. Which I want to point out is one of the creepiest scenes in the movie when he's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "You know who I am. We've met before. I'm at your house right now."
He's like, it is not my custom to go where I'm not invited or something
Right,
like that.
exactly. So I think this is Fred wrestling with himself. He knows what he's about to do. He knows that murder is at least on his mind. Like he's thinking about killing his wife, and
Now,
so appears this manifestation of his darkest impulses.
now also I want to get like kind of more into like this kind of like Schopenhauerian thing of this experience. Like if time is an illusion, right? If time doesn't really exist, all this stuff happens is just as a fact. So the presence of the mystery man, like even though the murder technically hasn't happened yet, it already exists. If if
Mm,
if reality in the universe is just like this aggregate of events without time connecting it, without a timeline, like he already the in some time, in some place, some part of eternity, he's already murdered his wife. And the mystery man is like, oh, we've met before.
Right.
because time is like a concept, an illusion. And in a lot of Lynch's films, he does a lot of stuff with time not really existing or moving backwards or like being like a static thing that there's no progression on it. You know what I mean? So that's another reason that I think that the Mystery Man is like a non-corporeal like person, like an entity that just sort of is existing in this absolute world.
Right. I am completely on board with that. And
Yeah.
when you see a quick shot of when Fred comes home, like you see like that electricity flash, and then you see two shadows against the wall, not just
Yeah.
one, two. Um, which and I think at that point, I can't remember if I think Fred was about to kill her or had already killed her.
In some ways, it doesn't even matter really because
Exactly,
in
because of what you
some,
just said. Yeah.
yeah, of some place in the universe, he already killed her, you know?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And um I like that they don't show the murder either. You just see Fred kind of, yeah, go down this dark hallway, and when he comes back, you just know something's happened, something's different. But Fred himself is unwilling to accept this about himself until he sees a videotape of what he's actually done. You can't hide, you can't see things as you want to see them anymore. You have to see them for what they are.
And even the presence of the videotape is like, the Mystery Man has like an archive of deeds or something like that that he just like cut pieces out of and gave to him to show him as in real time, you know?
Right, exactly. And I love how it cuts to, like, this is before found footage, so seeing stuff like that, like the home camera stuff, was very kind of fresh and new. You don't get a lot of it in this movie, but it does make it a little bit more horrific.
Yeah, totally.
And so yeah, Fred goes to jail, and this is a part I like really want to about Pete is, does Pete really exist?
I think Pete is just another version of Fred, really. I think like we were talking, like I was talking, alluding to earlier about in an infinite world, like an infinity, there's every aspect of you exists somewhere.
Right.
So Pete Dayton is just another aspect of Fred Madison. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I think okay. So yeah, Fred is arrested and he's in jail and he's having headaches. And then I thought this was interesting. It showed the lost highway, the yellow lines. Before we meet Pete, it becomes two yellow lines. In every other shot, the lines in the road are singular, but before it pulls up to Pete, they're double lines, which I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, no,
Um,
definitely.
I kind of took it as this is again a man in jail, and you get this sort of fantasy, this sort of dream where he's still not quite accepting reality, and he invents this other person to be.
Oh,
He's young, he's younger, he's kind of man. He has a manly job. He's a mechanic.
okay.
All these girls want him, sort of like this fantasy idea of who he is, because he's a guy who can't perform.
Oh,
His
interesting.
wife
Okay.
is cheating on him. Um, but the fantasy begins to crumble because it all starts to happen all over again. He meets Alice, who is Renee with blonde hair, and she's involved in the porn business. So I think he was constructing this elaborate fantasy that is falling apart in prison. That's what I think.
That's
This
interesting,
is
man. I never really thought about that way, but it could be, and that's
Yeah.
like I guess like I like that, you know. And my take on it though is like I was saying that I just think that Pete is another aspect of Fred that he ported
Right.
himself through. Because like when you were talking about the highway scene, he made some connection into this other version of other sector of infinity where he was able to become Pete again, who exists in a separate timeline.
Mm.
And
And that's yeah.
when he enters Pete's life is when the aspect he drags in the aspects of his other existence as Fred, because Pete is living his life, you know, he's got a girlfriend, he's got a group of friends, he's got his job, working for Richard Pryor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Artie,
Great.
Arnie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Gary Busey, who's his dad, they mention of like something happening to Pete. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like something happened. Like it shows him sort of walking to the road again, a surge of
Yeah.
electricity and people screaming and very, very Lynchian.
Yeah. So there's like at that's why for my take on it is that Fred somehow jumped the timelines and his consciousness became part of Pete, even though Pete he found another aspect of himself to escape to. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
And
Yeah.
that jump created another tendril on the timeline where all of his negative shit followed him into this other reality. And then there came another branch on Pete's timeline where
Yeah.
Alice comes in, who is also Renee,
Hmm.
because he's just minding his own business, man. Like he even knew Mr. Eddie prior to that. You know, Mr. Eddie was Robert Loggia's character, the mobster or the criminal guy.
Yeah.
He brings his car down and gets serviced all the time. Um, Actually, this is one of my favorite scenes in all of Lynch's films. Is just like the interaction between him and Mr. Eddie. And
Yeah. 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 It's
he's
great
like,
stuff.
and he's like, he just returned from something that happened to him. He's just going back to work. And Mr. Eddie shows up, and then he shows up again with, his new woman, Alice, this beautiful
Yeah.
blonde. And the scene where she comes out of the car and Pete sees her for the first time, and they're playing, it's all in slow motion, and they're playing the Lou Reed cover of This Magic Moment
Yes. Yeah.
is like so powerful. And you know, I gotta give credit to Balthazar Getty for just using his face and his eyes to portray his feelings when he sees Alice walking out of the car.
Yeah. He's
It's
really good in this.
Yeah, dude, he kills it in this movie. And also,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all like very expressionistic. It's all done with like no dialogue, so people can superimpose their own ideas on the scene. But like, I
Yeah.
see it as like a recognition, of some part of him where they already knew each other, where they already met, they were already part of it. They've lived another life together. And that look on his face and in his eyes in the slow motion, this magic moment, like, and even like, I mean, I'm getting really granular with this because this magic moment is like one of my favorite songs. It's like,
Nice.
this magic moment, was like any other until I met you.
Hmm.
And it's like everything changed for him when she came into his life.
Right. So, like, yeah, that's what's so cool about Lynch movies. You can just discuss and take so many different things from it. This to me seems sort of like how Renee and Fred, this is some sort of combination of like how they met in the past.
Yeah.
Like this is
Yeah.
him thinking about the past. And again, reality slowly seeping in and collapsing the fantasy. Like at one point, Pete's working on a car and he hears jazz on the radio, and it's the song we heard Fred performing in the club earlier. And it's hurting Pete's head.
Yeah.
And he can't take it. He's like, shut it off, shut it off. And Jack Nance goes, I like that. Um, that again, that could be like him pushing who he really is away. Like, I don't want to think about who I am. I don't want to think about this at all. That's sort
Yeah.
of how I took all of that. Now, Mr. Eddie, the whole it's interesting about that. Mr. Eddie's like slowly, like okay, so Pete and Alice obviously had this instant attraction. They begin having an affair, and all of a sudden, Mr. Eddie, who was like loved Pete, is all of a sudden sort of like a menacing character to him. Like he flips the next time he sees him.
He suspects, that there's something going on between the two of them,
Yeah, and the mystery man now is starting to show up in Pete's life. He's with Mr. Eddie calling him on the phone, and it's interesting too. The conversation between the mystery man and Fred completely mirrors the conversation between Pete and the mystery man. They're identical, word for word.
Yeah, I think he says like, "Oh, we've met before. I think we've met before." Yeah.
Yeah, and one of my love the line when Mr. Eddie goes, just wanted to jump back on the line, saying, glad you're doing okay.
Yeah, he's like, yo, you sure? You sure, Pete? You doing all right? You know,
Yeah.
like it's like,
But again, the circular nature, like, which made me think, I know I've seen this movie a handful of times, and every time I take new things away from it.
yeah,
And for this time, I think Fred killed Mr. Eddie too.
yeah,
And that's what started it all. So what we're seeing is like at the beginning of the movie, when you see that disturbed look on Fred's face, he has already killed Mr. Eddie, Dick Laurent, and
yeah.
has not yet fully processed what he's done.
I agree with that completely. And like you were saying earlier about Renee, the version of Renee, where it's like, Fred's like a musician in a jazz avant-garde experimental band. And yet they live in this like lavish like place. So, and they don't really give um Renee's fully developed backstory. She's just in the beginning and then she's dead and they move on. So where does all that money come from?
Yeah.
Like how do they live in that place like that? And instead of like in some one room apartment in Echo Park or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she was obviously in with these bad people, who you learn Mr. Eddie is a porn producer or something like that, and Renee slash Alice was pretty much forced to be a part of this, to work for them. There's that really disturbing scene where there's a gun put to her head and she's forced to get naked for Mr. Eddie. And
The Marilyn Manson cover of "I Put a Spell on You" playing underneath.
yes, exactly. Yeah. That's a great song. Even Marilyn Manson can't ruin it. So she's involved with these shady people, and I don't think it's ever sat well with Fred. It doesn't sit well with Pete. And again, this is Fred remembering the past, remembering how things went wrong, and the fantasy just crumbles. At least that's what I think.
And also, it speaks to a lot of the male just frailties of men, really, in some ways. You know what I mean? It's like,
No,
this,
definitely.
maybe this is like a hyperbolic sort of example of just in general, men maybe not being so comfortable with like the past of like, their partners and things like that.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, Fred seems to really want to control Renee, and him not being able to get it up is probably not being able to control that. You have the scene with Mr. Eddie beating up someone for tailgating him.
That's
Um,
funniest
I
scene.
think, yeah, it's very funny, but I think it's in there for a reason, not to be weird, but just to show this is about like frail masculinity,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, the
You know,
frail male ego. Yeah, because Mr. Eddie's like very particular about that tailgating, and he has a super extreme reaction to it. And then Fred, you know, his reaction to being uncomfortable with things about his partner's past, who he
yeah,
chose to be with,
right.
results in him murdering someone
Yeah,
and
two
her, and
people.
both two people. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So yeah, and that's an interesting thing to touch on too. It's like, and that's almost like a secondary. Well, I don't know about secondary because I think in general this movie has to do just about like darkness within everybody.
Yeah. Again, yeah, it sort of boils down to a somewhat simple idea, but told in this very complex, interesting manner. The ending's been debated a lot of what the ending means. Well, the whole movie's debated what it means, but
Yeah.
once Pete turns back into Fred, and Fred leaves the message that Dick Laurent is dead. We find that out. And then we see him start to transform again as he's being chased down the Lost Highway. And I've heard that him at the end transforming is him being put in the electric chair. Um, but I mean, there's a lot of ways to take it. Maybe this is again like Fred unwilling to accept his situation, and he's now going to construct an entire new fantasy to escape his very harsh reality.
Yeah, the ending, um, yeah, that's a hard one to quantify, really. It's like clearly Fred gets executed. You
You think
know,
so? Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
To me, he gets executed, and that's like the end of that particular timeline for him. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And then, but like I was saying earlier, with the idea of like multiple realities, multiverses, the other timelines continue on, you know, and and they play out whatever conclusion they come to.
Hmm, that is very interesting. It could
Yeah,
be, yeah. And
yeah.
Lynch never explains anything. He
No,
never
no.
will go in an interview and tell you exactly what he's thinking. And that's what kind of what I love about David Lynch. You know, he said in an interview a long time ago, the best mysteries are never solved.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that explains his philosophy of filmmaking. Everything's there for you to put together, but it's always going to be your interpretation. It might not be exactly what his intent was, and that's one of the things I love about him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and also like you touched on the fact that he was a fine arts guy in the beginning. Like that's where his
Right.
background mostly is. So I mean, when you, I don't like, I'm not, I don't know much about art. You know what I mean myself. Like when it comes to visual art,
No, me
and
neither.
I mean, I like more illustration stuff. I guess you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like fine art, I don't really consider myself at all knowledgeable about it. But I imagine like if you're creating real pieces like that, it's very subjective, and even that subjectivity probably changes over time.
Right.
So that's
Yes.
what that's he carried that into his filmmaking, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've even heard theories from friends who are like all of Lynch's movies are some, sort of like shared universe kind of thing. Like,
I
I
don't know
mean,
about that.
yeah, like I think they share common themes. I think Lynch has things that he goes back to. But some people seem to think like this, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, like they're all I mean not Twin Peaks, they're all connected somehow.
That's
And
interesting, but there's nothing that leads me to believe that, though. Really.
right, like the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks isn't in this or Mulholland, but he does always love those like mystery boxes, or like in Lost Highway, it's a like shack on the sand instead of
Yeah.
the Black Lodge. He loves those like strange rooms where people come out differently.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I just think he's like a filmmaker that goes back to the same themes, and therefore like they may all of his films may look connected on some cosmic level, but I think they're each their own worlds that he's created.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's yeah. I kind of don't think like Dale Cooper lives in the same world as Fred Madison. You know what I mean? But like,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's the David Lynch universe though that you're checking things out in, really.
Right. Yeah. I mean, man, Lynch hasn't made a ton of films since this. He's really
No,
only made
no.
a couple.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he did the third season of Twin Peaks, and that was what, like almost 10 years ago at this point.
At this point, yeah, it's been a while, and that might be the last we see of him. But since then, he's made The Straight Story, he's made Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire. It's just not a lot, unfortunately.
You've seen The Straight Story?
Yeah, I own it. It's great.
Yeah, I've
It's
seen it too.
it's like it's so un-Lynchian that it is Lynchian. I really like it. I pretty much love almost everything David Lynch has done, but I have a certain fondness for this one because it brings me back to that time that in Boston in '97, things were new and exciting, and just how floored I was after seeing this and how it turned over and over in my head. And every time I rewatch it, just comes flooding back. Like, man, this is so good. It was really, like I said, shit on when it came out. Got bad reviews. People, your average film goer who saw it fucking hated it. Um, but time's been kind to this one. It's in the Criterion Collection now, and people are seeing it more through modern eyes, or they've seen more of Lynch's work, and now they get this one a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I was on board from day one, man. What do you give this out of
Oh, dude, I give it a 5, man.
Yeah,
Honestly. Yeah.
yeah, me too.
I-
This is hey, Brandon Legion and I were just talking earlier. This is his favorite Lynch film.
yeah.
Um, This is up there for me. I think it's between this and Mulholland Drive as my favorite.
Yeah, depending on what day of the week you ask me, it's either one of those two films that would be my favorite for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and like I said, this should feel like weirdly dated with all the like the Marilyn Manson and Rammstein and all that, but it doesn't at all. Like it still feels fresh and after watching this, I was listening to the soundtrack and listening to the David Bowie song. I fucking man, I love this movie.
No, it's great. It's yeah, and I have the Criterion channel. Like I have the Blu-ray of this too, but I also have the Criterion channel. So if you guys don't want to get, you know, physical media, which you should, because who
Hmm.
knows when these streaming channels gets, start getting going away, you need to have
Yeah,
something.
it's gonna
Um,
happen.
yeah, if you want to check it out streaming, do yourself a favor and get the Criterion channel for a few months and check out all Lynch's films and all the other great stuff they have on Criterion.
Yeah, they have some. They're amazing. I love the Criterion Collection. There are tons of cool stuff. I mean, I haven't even really dug too into the Blu-ray. There's a big essay in it I haven't read, but I watched some of the extras, and if you're a fan of Lynch, it's a must-have. Because I mean, even more fun than talking about Lynch is listening to people talk about him and what they
Yep.
think is going on in his films.
And the other thing too is like all throughout like the 90s and early part of 2000, like the DVD and earlier Blu-ray releases were very lean on extras.
Mm,
So
yeah,
the
true.
Criterion one, if you're going to go out and get something, get these, the Criterion one's the one to get for sure.
If Criterion version exists, that is always the one to get. Even if you already own it, it's worth upgrading to Criterion Collection for anything they have. I owned Cure for years and years, seen it a million times, and once the Criterion put it out, there's no way I'm not buying it.
Yeah, no, totally.
All
So yeah,
right.
yeah, there you have it. And yeah, if you guys out there are reluctant to get into David Lynch because of people have told you otherwise, take it from us. It's worth checking it out. Watch the movie. You have to watch things probably several times,
Yeah.
and they're always fun though, because they're so filled of style and atmosphere and cool stuff that they're very rewatchable.
Yeah, especially if you're a horror fan and you're into the atmospheric, thoughtful side of horror, like this is for you. I mean, David Lynch, his movies are like all atmosphere.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And everyone looks so cool in his movies too, you know?
that's true. Yeah, yeah,
Like,
they do. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
everyone looks
like
like, like Bill Pullman looks cool. He's got like this, vibe about him, and Patricia Arquette, like both of her characters look cool. Like the Renee character's got like her sexy bangs and everything, and Alice is a blonde, and she's got
yeah.
her thing going on.
Bill Pullman's not someone you always associate with being cool either. It's kind of a different role for him. Like he's
Yeah.
slick hair and he's like dressed kind of hipper or whatever, for lack of a better word. He's a murderer. He's just he's usually playing like the everyman kind of guy, and that's not the role he is in this. And Balthazar Getty, sadly, he hasn't really done much acting wise after this. He popped up in a few things here and there, but you would think from that movie alone he would have a bright career as a leading man, but it wasn't to be.
He looks cool too. He's got like a cool hair thing going on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. But I saw him pop up in Twin Peaks: The Return, which was good to see him, but I can't remember seeing him in much after this, which a
And
little weird.
and even like there's certain types of people that are just in all of his films too. Like for example, we were talking about Bill Pullman, but there's always that like slick back guy in all of his films. Like in Twin Peaks, it's Agent Cooper. You know,
Yes. Yeah,
in Mulholland Drive, like Justin Theroux is the slick back guy wearing all black. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
it,
Yeah.
it always comes down to a blonde and a brunette too.
Yeah. That's true. Yep.
Yep, they're common. Like even all the way back to Blue Velvet. We got
That's
Laura
true.
Laura
Because
Dern and Isabella
Laura Dern.
Rossellini.
Yeah. I just watched that too recently, as sort of like, preparing for this. That's a great movie too.
Dude, that's the beginning of the whole Lynch experience for me was Blue Velvet.
Oh, nice. Hey, maybe we should do that one someday.
I'm totally down, man, because that's a little bit more of a noir, like detective kind of thing. But yeah, for sure. That movie changed the way I was 18 years old when I saw that, and it changed my whole outlook on everything.
Oh, amazing. All right, yeah, we got to do that.
Yeah. All right,
All
man.
right.
So that was a good one. And thanks once again. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we really appreciate your continued support on all this stuff. And we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
Funny how secrets travel on. I start to believe if I were to leave, things guide a man, shakes his hands held high. A cruise beyond, cruise me, babe. A blonde belief beyond, beyond, beyond. Low me down, no return. I'm So cruise me, baby, beyond.